thank you everyone for joining us in this Wednesday, in this new webinar within the Data Driving Webinar Series hosted by Anjana Data. Today we have with us Marek Pikna, Customer Success Manager at MANTA. MANTA is one of our partners, and MANTA is the Unified Data Lineage platform. They are really experts in data lineage extraction and visualization. So, which one will be better for talking to us about automating the process of data decertification with Lineage? Okay, you have the chat on the right side of the window. There you can use the chat to leave your comments and ask your questions. And at the end of the session, we will have a Q&A time. So thank you everyone again for joining us. And I would like to start. I would like to introduce Marek. Hi, Marek. How are you?
I'm doing great, Mario. Thank you very much. How are you yourself?
Yeah, fine. Everything's fine here.
Perfect.
So please, Marek, tell us something about you and about MANTA, and then I will start with a brief introduction about data lineage and what is the difference between data lineage and data traceability, and then you will make your magic with data certification.
Right. So it's a pleasure to meet everyone. My name is Marek Pikna. At MANTA, I am responsible for handling our customers from technical side of things. It seems that I am having some technical issues with regarding to connection right now, and I will try to reconnect while...
But we are hearing you. So
you are hearing me.
Yeah.
So the video might not be there, but worry not, I am still here. At MANTA, I am responsible for handling our customers from technical side of things, ensuring that they can see Lineage in their environment and obtain the most value they can get from that. At MANTA, I would also like to tell you what MANTA is. We are a company providing a complex solution, providing a unified Lineage platform. We will get more into what we do and what the Lineage looks like, but that is a short introduction before we jump into everything.
Thank you, Marek. Okay, so let me share with you what we understand about data lineage and which are the difference between data lineage and data traceability, because this is usually misunderstood, and we would like to put some light on these concepts. Well, for us, data lineage is more related to the relations between these data assets, both business and technical, okay? Is much more related to how different the data assets relate between each other. And we can see it in this graph, okay? A graph-based library for this visualization. It's pretty cool when we want to see data lineage, okay? We may see data lineage like different constellations, and if we have 3 dimensions capability, it's pretty cool to see this kind of graphs and how the different assets relate between each other. So data lineage, okay, is much more like to answer the question, which other assets is this data asset related to? So, for example, if we are seeing a business asset, for example, a metric may be related to different dimensions. A metric may be related to other metrics or basic terms. A metric also may be related to reports or policies or data quality rules or many different business data assets, okay? But a metric could also be related to technical data assets. For example, the different fields on the tables, on the views, on the data sets where this metric is materialized, is represented, okay? Or, for example, which processes, which ETLs are transforming this metric, and so on. So with this kind of graph-based library, we may build constellations, different constellations, and show the data lineage, build this data ecosystem or data map for our organization. And with this, with the answer to this question, which other assets is this data related to, we may answer plenty of questions more and more about quality, about usage, about data temperature, about impacts, and so on. But what's the difference? What's the difference between data lineage and data traceability? Because these concepts are commonly misunderstood or mixed in different ways. Well, for us, data traceability is more related to the transformations applied to a specific data asset and the processes involved in data assets generation or consumption. So here in data traceability, we are not going to see these constellations, okay, this 3D big picture, but we are going to see things like this, more like data flows, okay, more linear flows, and so on. For example, we have here backward traceability. Backward traceability will answer us the question, or will give us the possibility to answer the question where this data asset comes from and which transformations have been applied to it. For example, a metric in a report, or a field within a table, where this field come from, which different transformations, which processes are involved in this data asset generation, okay? And then we have forward traceability, which is more related to consumption. Here we see, for example, users, and we try to answer the question, where is this data asset being used? Who is consuming this information and for what purpose? Which is really, really important for today's data governance issues. So with data traceability, we are more thinking about data flow, backward and forward. And when we talk about data lineage, we are more thinking about how the different data assets relate between each other. And it's more like related to semantics, okay? More like a mental map of the data assets. Well, that's all for the introduction, okay? Hope you have these concepts clear. I would really like to know more about your ideas about what's the difference between data lineage, data traceability, how we can represent them, and so on. But let me share the space to Marek, and Marek will talk more deeper about the data lineage and how MANTA can help with this.
Right, absolutely. You definitely covered the introduction to that. Thank you very much. I will share my screen real fast. I am trying to do so. Turn screen share on, and unfortunately nothing is happening. Running into some technical issues last minute.
No problem. We are on live. These things happen.
Okay, let me retry. There we go. This should start working. So you should be able to see my screen.
Yeah,
Perfect.
That's it.
Perfect.
I don't know if you can hear Marek. Marek, I can hear you.
And how about now?
Yeah, now.
Interesting. For some reason, both audio and video failed. So, as always, last minute, these kinds of things just happen. So, thank you for the introduction. As mentioned, you definitely covered the basics of data lineage. I definitely agree with your definition, and also agree with you that a very important point when discussing or considering data lineage is that it's not only necessary to know what kind of static objects interact together, so what tables you're getting data from, or on high level, what applications. But as you mentioned, traceability is the information that you get from processes, what kind of changes or what kind of transformations are applied to data. That is the very essential information that is also incredibly difficult to properly document. So in this presentation, we are first going to be taking a look at a short introduction of what MANTA is, who we are, and what we do. We will also be talking about the value that's provided by data lineage. But rather than just talking about in broad terms, talking generally about lineage being important, what we are going to focus on instead is showing you a real case how data lineage together with data governance can be used to resolve a particular issue. And at the end, we'll of course have a Q&A session. So MANTA itself is an end-to-end data lineage platform, providing end users with complete data lineage documentation, together with its transformations, as mentioned, the traceability. By providing this data lineage in an interactive form, we enable other organizations to achieve various very important aspects for them, starting, for instance, with regulatory compliance, a very common case for both data governance as well as data lineage, ensuring that the data is consistent, ensuring that it's used correctly based on certain regulations. Also further on enhancing data governance, which is exactly the case that we are actually going to be looking at today. And more, it's not only those, there's of course migration processes we can help with. We can help optimize the environment, make sure that from architectural point, the environment is working as it should be, or is optimized and therefore working even better than before, and so on and so on. So the way that MANTA works itself is that we look directly at the metadata within the environment. So we connect to the databases, we connect to the ETL repositories, we connect to, let's say, BI tools, the reporting tools which are used, and extract and analyze their metadata. So we look at, for instance, in databases, at SQL definitions, we look at procedures, table definitions, views, macros, triggers, and whatnot. The environment can, of course, have very vastly different metadata. In case of ETL, we, for instance, gather the workflows and investigate what happens within. And by analyzing every single one of these tools, we are able to document the lineage within. We are able to analyze not only what the structures represent, what tables there are, but also how the tables interact together, what agents push the data around, what procedures are used to, what procedures are, for instance, called when certain data is transformed, what data is transformed, how is it being, let's say, taken from a different repository. That's exactly the information we're able to obtain. And by doing so, we provide an interactive visualization with complete end-to-end data lineage. When I mention end-to-end, what that truly represents is that the lineage provided begins from its source until the very end, until the very last piece of consumption. So for instance, if we consider a common environment in, for instance, financial institutions, we can think of multiple databases, multiple source systems. For instance, to be more specific, they are based on Microsoft SQL, Postgre, Oracle SQL, and these databases provide data to a central data warehouse. But that is done through a certain integration tool. There has to be a data integration layer. For instance, Informatica Power Center connects to these multiple different systems and transports them to data warehouse, can be Teradata, just to be more specific. But by doing so, it further on aggregates the data, transforms the data, even before it even lands in the warehouse. And even when it lands in the warehouse, the data is then going into the, let's say, staging area, where it's further transformed into a certain MART area, where it's also being picked up by another tool. It can be Tableau, for instance, a reporting tool, or any kind of other BI tool, which is used to generate reports for management. And this becomes a very, very complex ecosystem working with, let's say, the same data, but overall, it's just a big data lineage pipeline that is incredibly complicated. But with MANTA, all of these relationships become easy to understand. So I would just like to take a look at, in general, for instance, very swiftly just cover the value that MANTA can provide. We'll, of course, be going deeply into one specific case, but I would just like to mention that through automating the process of obtaining data lineage and documentation, it becomes possible to have up-to-date, which is, as we are going to see, very important, up-to-date documentation of your environment, which will enable you to very quickly deliver information to the end users which they need, which might be, for instance, what kind of impact each data does, trace how it has been transformed for reporting purposes, or others as well. One that I would like to also mention is provide clear and easy to understand visualization. As mentioned, the data lineage graph can be complex, and most likely is in these environments which are deeply integrated. The data lineage pipeline is incredibly difficult. If we were, for instance, just going to visualize everything in a single graph, truth is, it would not be really understandable. It would not provide much value. What we understand that at MANTA, and what we really strive to do, is provide easy to comprehend visualization with filtering options, with other abilities, but really to ensure that you can see what you are really interested in. By using MANTA, we also generally ensure that there are no lineage mysteries, that there is no black box or a black box which you do not even know about within the environment, changing your data, that there is a procedure call that nobody even knows about, because with MANTA, you are directly going to see that. And also related data governance, where it might be necessary, for instance, to have data flow audits, make sure that your environment is using data consistently everywhere, really increase the accuracy. So a common question is really, who is data lineage for, or who is MANTA for? Who are the possible end users? And truly what we see is that it's not just, let's say, one group of end users in a company. It's typically not just, let's say, data architects. It's not just SQL developers. MANTA can be utilized and is utilized by many, many different positions within companies. For instance, starting with certain data stewards who really need to understand, as we'll see in the presentation, who really need to understand what is the data sets they're working on or working with to really ensure trust in them. At the same time, data lineage is also highly utilized by, for instance, IT developers. It can be application developers even, but they will also need to know what kind of data they're working with. They will need to know, if they're integrating some systems, what data is there and what they can do with it, or if there are some changes, what kind of changes have happened. Similar to that, what we see is that, for instance, data architects might really want to fully document their environment and ensure that the environment is working as intended. Data scientists, for instance, a very common issue that they might be running into is that they have a data set that they should be working with, but they don't even know what's happened to the data. They might just know some values, but truth is that the values are going to be slightly transformed. They could be aggregated, but they really have to know how. And it does not even end here directly within, let's say, data environment. With data lineage and MANTA, it's possible we see use cases that go far and beyond the data sector. For instance, project management. We have seen use cases very specifically for data migration, where the actual project managers had to understand their environment. They had to, first of all, understand what they want to migrate, what is even within the environment. And more important than that, for project management, define a certain plan. For instance, plan a POC where they would only take a look at a small part of the environment and only move that one first. But that becomes very difficult to do, very difficult to just select one part if there is some integration occurring. You cannot just take one table and be done. There really needs to be one solution, and you need to know everything about it. So data lineage can be used and is utilized by many different end users within companies. What I would like to take a look at one additional thing, because a very good question would be, but why is it necessary to have data lineage automated? Why is it difficult to do so manually? And there are three main reasons. On this slide, there are also more covered, but I would like to really focus on three of them because they will also be still coming up during the case that we're going to be looking at. The first of which is the rate of change. Over time, the environment is going to be changing. There is going to be new applications provided, applications, even old, are going to be maintained. There is going to be procedures changing over time. There's going to be new tables, new views, etc., etc. And those changes are not going to be happening rarely. On the contrary, these changes are going to be happening daily. There are going to be daily new adjustments in the environment. In order to really document this completely, it would be absolutely necessary to just stay on top of everything and make sure that everything is documented real time once it happens in a single space, fully consistently in a full accuracy. So due to this high velocity of changes, let's say, that becomes incredibly difficult. But not only that, there's also the other difficult point, which is the scope, or as I would also say, for instance, volume of metadata or data. Because truly, as mentioned before, the data lineage pipeline itself can be incredibly large. There can be multiple systems integrated together, not just can be, there are, and you really need to make sure that all of those are covered. If any of those are not covered, then you just end up having a black box, and you might know that the data is going to be going there, but that does not really provide you with, as mentioned by Mario previously, the full information on the traceability or the lineage. And the third part, which is also really, which makes it incredibly difficult to do so manually, is the level of detail. As mentioned, it can be done to, for instance, just mention that an application is sending data to an application. But if you want to also know what attributes are being sent or how they are transformed, you are going to be arriving to a highly complex task, because that would require fully going through code, fully going through all available metadata and documentation of tools in order to ensure this kind of high level of detail. All of these three, when are coupled together, shows just how difficult it is to truly have a map of data lineage in an environment. There are, of course, further difficult points. I would just like to, for instance, mention that the company doesn't even need to change the environment because they have architects or engineers to do so. It can also be, for instance, that the company has performed a merger and acquisition, at which point they need to consolidate their environment. And once again, you are running into the same issues. Just instead of one environment, you are now dealing with two. And similar to that, there is, of course, many other aspects. But let us focus on the three. And while doing so, I could be talking about data lineage in an abstract form, as mentioned, but I think that what's going to be far more valuable than that is going to take a look at a real scenario, which we have had with one of our customers, and show how lineage can be leveraged to really solve not only a certain problem, but also a problem that's very much intertwined with data governance. So essentially the issue that the customer came to us with was that their management was getting different information, however, about same data. More specifically, they were getting reports made by different BI teams, for instance, to be more specific, risk department or department for physical customers. All of those were using the same data in the same CRM application. But even then, the reports still had drastically different numbers. Due to that, the management could not really trust the reports, be it made by the risk department or physical customers or any other department which would provide a similar report, since all of those were different. This becomes a very common task for data governance. There needs to be a certain process, there needs to be a certain solution in order to really understand which data is working as intended, etc., etc. So let's take a look at how this issue can be solved. But more importantly than that, let's actually begin with the other way. Why does this even happen? Why did this situation where the reports have different numbers, even though they are working with the same original data? Because if we take a look at it from this, let's say, simplified understanding, all of the data is just coming from the CRM applications. It's a single application providing a single export, and therefore these departments or teams should be working with the actual same data sets. They could transform it for their own needs, but at the end of the day, they are working with the same data. But as we see time and time again at MANTA, that is never the case. This is really overly simplifying it, because in actuality, what it would look more like is something like this. The CRM application would be there and would be the number one source. It would be the only source, for instance. There would not be any source back to that in the upstream. But the truth is that this data is actually being picked up by a tool. We can think Informatica Power Center, as it was mentioned, modern times Spark, that has been placed into a certain database or warehouse. And there, it's being transformed further on. There can be further data provided into it based on some needs, on some requirements by the teams. And essentially, you're going to have two completely different data lineage pipelines for two departments. Even though they start at the same point, they are going to be different. And this, in this case, it's kind of visualized in the sense that it's immediately different, but it could become different. This data lineage pipeline could become different almost at the end, but still, there is no guarantee that they are going to be the same data sets. I actually have prepared a small screenshot from a similar case in MANTA. So this is a screenshot taken from MANTA on table level lineage. So it's showing which tables interact with each other. And what we can see here, if we really take a look at it, is on the most leftmost side, we are looking at a table which is related to CRM export. This CRM export is then being used, first of all, if we take a look in the top, by one system. In blue color, we can see that the systems are color-coded differently. So one system is taking this data and pushing it somewhere else into another system, where that could actually be the final part. But then underneath, there's once again a different system working with this data once again. And at the bottom, there is yet another system. In this case, it's actually Microsoft SSIS picking the data up and sending it somewhere else. So even though management is looking at a report made by, which is coming from CRM, truth is that that does not give them any kind of guarantee. That really means that there was an ultimate source, but through changes, there is no guarantee that the departments are working with the same data. So what is the solution here? We understand that the problem that the customer was running into is really that what they needed to find out was two options. One of them was impossible, and that was ensuring that everybody is just working within one data set, but that is not really an option. So rather than that, they had a solution, or they had thought of solution, which combines the approach of data lineage together with data governance. As the solution, the data governor, or we can think of asset owner, data steward, would certify a particular data set. If I may use the term, bless the data set, by doing so state that this data set is correct and can be utilized. And then all of those reports would be valid. All of those reports could be trusted by management, as there is a person responsible for maintaining the correctness of data. But once again, from general perspective, we are going to run into the issue without lineage. How can they truly say if that data set is fine? How can they say that the data set is working as intended without the information of what has actually been done to the data, without the backwards traceability, in words of Mario? They cannot really state if all of the data is fine, because they do not really know what happened to it. For instance, in this diagram, in the green boxes, those are the data sets which were deemed to be certified. So all of these reports are currently being used, and they are completely fine. By understanding this entire lineage graph, understanding transformations, the actual data steward, asset owner, was able to say that everything is fine, the data set is as intended. But now they have been able to solve, let's say, one part of the difficulty. As mentioned, the one part of difficulty was complexity and scope, that their data lineage pipeline is large, or that it's very difficult to be at low level, to be at attribute level of detail. But there's still one difficulty that makes this incredibly difficult to do, even in any other way, which is the change history. Because as mentioned, the environment is bound to be changed. It's never going to be the same. As one philosopher has said, change is the only constant in our lives. Truth is that there are going to be changes. They can be minor. It can be just a minor change that a new column has been added somewhere, and that does not really change anything. At which point, everything is fine as is. But it can also be a significant change. We can think of the CRM application just completely changing its, let's say, semantics of the data provided. Or it can be the ETL job that is pushing data into warehouse. Truth is that these changes are going to be happening. But any kind of change without investigation, without analysis and confirmation that a change is fine, is going to mean that this data set that we have been working with is going to be decertified. It has to be, because there has been a change. We can no longer trust it without investigation. For instance, in this diagram, we can see in the yellow box a certain change. And due to that, in the red color, a previously certified data set needs to be decertified. By understanding these changes within the environment, understanding where exactly they happen, it's possible now for the asset owner, data steward, to really investigate, to ensure that this change is either completely fine and therefore certify the data set once again as fully correct and usable by the reporting team, or on the other hand, state that this change is not fine enough and that there should be another process. For instance, it should be changed to the previous state, or there should be some other approach performed. But at the end of the day, that is the effort that they are going to be able to do by combining these by combining the data lineage approach, understanding what happens within the environment, together with their data governance solutions. So, as mentioned, solving this problem is incredibly difficult. And the worst part about it is that these changes are not uncommon at all. It's not a problem that would just happen once. In reality, changes happen over time. And what we see time and time again with our customers is that changes, rather than having certain constant process to them, which would be documented, result in a chain of incidents. Incident management, where teams need to be informed that a change has been done and something has been broken, that they need to fix something because a report is not usable, instead of properly understanding their environment. In order to solve this, what is really necessary is to properly understand the environment, completely end to end. It's not enough to just know the data that the reporting is picking up, because that's not the, let's say, all of the information that you can get. And what's even more difficult is the ability to have the full documentation that's up to date together with the changes. In order to solve such an issue, and as mentioned, it's not uncommon, it's such data trust and understanding of dependencies is very common in data governance. What is really required is understanding of changes over time and having up-to-date data lineage. And as mentioned, it's not only just data lineage. What is also truly necessary to fully leverage such a solution and make such a process in place is also clear set, well-defined, a data governance process. So through leveraging both, in this particular case, the management can trust the reports once again, and also, can be very important also, is streamline the process itself. Ensure that the process management is not just, let's say, degenerating into incident management, but is fully ensured to be consistent and defined. So that covers the part that I wanted to go through regarding data lineage together with data governance. There is, of course, many other possibilities of leveraging data lineage and data governance, but we thought it much better than to bore you with abstract information, abstract value, show you a real use case and show you a real situation where data lineage and data governance can be utilized.
Thank you very much, Marek. Much valuable, really, really clarification. I will also add about the importance of business glossary in this use case, because finally you talk about different results or different informations coming from the same data, but the first question to be arised there should be, are you representing the same information? Are we talking about the same metrics, or are we talking the same lineage, language, and so on? So I could start from this part, and then of course all the lineage and all the certification process to have the different processes involved certified by the data owners, really valuable. Thank you very much for your exposition. I will also make some appointment about the question that we have previously launched in LinkedIn. We use this new feature from LinkedIn to ask you a question about the data lineage, and which is the main characteristic that make you not documenting data lineage. Not? I don't know if you have the results of the survey.
I do have them, but I cannot access them on this computer.
Well, let me get them. Well, there were three different options available. It was because of the complexity of the scripts, because of the lack of time, and which was the other one?
It was the constant changes.
And the constant changes. And most of the people say that the most important thing in data lineage is the constant changes.
Right. That very much covers the big part of what was mentioned in the presentation. True answer is all of those. It's not just one. It's all of those. But the constant changes really highlight the need to have up-to-date information about the environment and also be able to go in past and see what the changes even were.
Yeah, that's it. I think it's really important. I also usually talk about why the data governance should be in the center of the data ecosystem. And of course, data lineage is a really important part of the big picture of data governance. And that's because data governance should have eyes on everywhere. And not only this passive data governance, hey, I just extract metadata and that's all. No, you need to constantly detecting changes. You need to involve the stakeholders. You need to put this data governance at the very first of your data value chain. So then you may change things. You may use this data governance to leverage all the value that data has within it. Okay, so time for questions. I don't know if you have any questions. What do you think, Marek?
So, from MANTA's perspective, from automated analysis, truth is that there is very small difference between the two. Because at the end of the day, it is data that is moved, but possibly transformed. It can be moved one-to-one, it can be transformed, but at the end of the day, you want both pieces of information, not just one. And without one or the other, you are going to be losing certain value. When it comes to, for instance, traceability, not having information, only having information about transformations or processes, you are going to be losing about the information on what these processes are related to. You are not going to know what data sets are transformed, what has been impacted, what has been changed, what data is part of a certain process. Without the information on traceability, without knowing what happens to your data, you are, for instance, going to know where your data is used, but that's really it. You are losing on a very important portion of the data. For instance, as mentioned, common use case for data scientists. What do they need to do when they don't understand data or the data set they have? Figure out what has been done to it, what values there are and why the values are there. But even if they know where is the data coming from, without knowing what transformations were applied, that just cannot be fully covered. So I think it's actually necessary to have both.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think that they are both necessary, but I will say, and I don't know if you agree with me, but I think that it's better and also simpler to start from the data mapping, from extracting the metadata, cataloging or classifying the data assets, and then going deeper into the data traceability and data lineage part, because I think it's simpler, and you may have a first value if you have this data map, and you may know which data assets you have in your data ecosystem, and then be aware about how these data assets are being transformed, being generated, being consumed, and so on. I don't know if you agree with me.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It is a good process, but it's also really important to always note that the difficult point, one of the many, is the level of detail.
Yeah.
By doing manual approach, the level of detail is just a cost that is going to hit you.
Yeah, it's impossible. You cannot manage it. It's too many information. Regarding this complexity, I always say black magic does not exist. So we need to be aware about the technology, which technology we are using, how are we using this technology, and so on, because there are things that simply cannot be extracted or something like that. You need to infer something. And yeah, it's really complex. It's really complex when we talk about the detail level. Sure. I can read here some questions about the tool licenses and so on. For these kind of questions, if you want to take a look about MANTA, you can talk to Marek Pikna. If you want to talk about Anjana Data, you can talk to me, Mario De Francisco. So this kind of questions more related to the tools, I will point you out to Marek for MANTA and me for Anjana Data. And we have all the questions. Is it possible to have sentinels that warn of important changes in Lineage? How is possible to set them? Well, I think that sentinels mean like agents. Yeah, sure. Right. It's there are, in fact, there are different technologies that the data lineage can be only extracted by using agents, because these kind of technologies are not declarative. For example, if we talk about a Spark or this kind of technology, you cannot extract data lineage or data traceability just by parsing code. You need agents which intercept the processes and extract the information in processing time and so on.
Right. In this case, I also think the question goes to data lineage and what options there are to warn about the changes. As mentioned, if we can, for instance, map the lineage and know that certain objects, for instance, are important to us in the presentation, for instance, the certified data sets, if it's possible to automatically somehow do this. And that certainly is. At MANTA, we provide an export or API, which enables you to connect to the lineage automatically and analyze this to your needs. So for instance, you can compare changes programmatically and ensure that one data lineage pipeline is not affected, or if it is, warn the sentinel or a data owner, asset owner, data steward, anyone.
Yeah, but it's important for some technologies to have this kind of demons, agents, that you need to just put on the nodes, on the working nodes or something, the processing nodes, to look at what's happening in the data processing platform, because other way you cannot extract this kind of lineage from these technologies. There is another question. When you need all the information for true data governance, what happens when a company wants to transform the data in some step, but wants to keep the transformation confidential? I'm not sure if I truly understand the question. It's I think something related to data sensitivity and so on. But from my point of view, the sensitivity applies, or usually applies, to data, not to transformations. So we will try to think about confidential data or sensitive data, but not the transformation. I'm not sure if I'm catching right the question. I don't know what you think, Marek.
I completely agree with you. It's necessary to differentiate between the lineage pipeline if the step is just data or if it's transformation. On the contrary, transformations should not be kept completely confidential, because the main reason why you would even want to keep them confidential is probably because you're not doing something nice with your data. Because realistically, if you are working with sensitive data, there are regulators. We can think of GDPR. We can think of Basel. You need to prove that the transformation is correct. You don't have to show anyone the data itself. That can be completely confidential, related only to your organization. But at the end of the day, that is the information that is really important to be able to provide. What happens to the data?
Yeah, maybe it could be related to models, to AI models or machine learning, or some algorithm that should be kept confidential because, I don't know, maybe there is a patent or something like that. I'm just guessing. But I think that confidentiality and sensitivity should be applied to data. In fact, when we also talk about metadata, I think that one thing that data governance want to put on the table is transparency and data democratization. And you cannot democratize data. You cannot foster data access or data sharing if you mask metadata. You need to public metadata. You need to make metadata transparent to everyone in the organization, or to everyone who you want to look at the data you have, because other way it's impossible. How could I know which data I need if I cannot look for the context, or if I cannot ask for some metadata? It's impossible. And from the Lineage view, it's much more the same. You need to know where this data come from, how has been generated, who is consuming it, and so on. Otherwise, you are blind. You are blind. Confidentiality and sensitivity should be applied to data, personal data, financial data, medical data, and so on, but not processes or metadata.
Absolutely agreed.
Good. I think that we have covered everything, and time is coming to us. So I would like to thank you, Marek, for your time and for your presentation. I'm watching that more questions are arising specific to the tools. So please, for this kind of questions, just point out directly to Marek, okay? And if you want if you have any question about Anjana Data, you may come to me. I think that's all for today. Many thanks, Marek, for your presentation. Much valuable. Congratulations.
Happy to be here.
And hope to see you again in the new webinars that we are hosting by Anjana Data in this end of the year. Thank you very much and best wishes.
Thank you too. And everyone, have a great rest of your day.
Bye.